More than 11,000 of the 66,000 New South Wales government employees volunteered for military service during the First World War. They were police, teachers, nurses, railway and harbour workers, administrators, clerks, printers, draftsmen and politicians. People from all walks of life and from all over New South Wales. More than 10% paid the ultimate sacrifice. 1,500 never came home. My name is Jeff Hinchcliffe and I am the Director of the State Records Authority of New South Wales. Our exhibition, Public Service War Service, has been produced to mark the Centenary of Anzac and commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the First World War. Public Service War Service acknowledges and honours the role of New South Wales government employees during the war and the many sacrifices that were made, both here in Australia and overseas. Here are some of their stories.
Albert Tuck was a pressman with the New South Wales Government Printing Office when he enlisted on the 17th of August 1914. It was only 2 weeks after the declaration of war by Britain and Australia on Germany. At the time, though, the war was expected probably not to last for, well, beyond Christmas was what the thought was, Christmas 1914. So it was only a number of months they thought it would all be resolved. Only a day after landing at Anzac Cove, Albert Tuck had been wounded and was being conveyed back to camp by stretcher when he came under enemy machine gun fire and was killed. Albert's cousin Reginald Tuck, enlisted only a week after Albert had, is reported to have erected a cross, a wooden cross, on Albert's grave.
A big storm came up later on and blew the cross into the sea. And it was picked up eventually by a Norwegian ship, and they couldn't understand what it was, so it was taken to England, the cross, by the captain of the ship, and put in a cathedral over there. Eventually the cross was returned to Australia to his parents. That's a photo of Albert just before he went over to overseas to Gallipoli. And he looks as if he's a strong sort of fellow. I remember my mother talking about Albert, and she said what a lovely man he was. And I believe he was engaged to be married before he left. He was one of the sons of 15 children. And then my father went over and he came back. But he was traumatised all his life. He used to sit in the chair in the dark at night and couldn't sleep. And I used to go through the lounge room sometimes at night, and I'd see a cigarette burning, and that's all you could see, it going backwards and forth. He just couldn't sleep. He probably have terrible nightmares. It's so sad, the war, isn't it? It's really bad.
It wasn't until I did a bit more digging that I realised that, yes, they were a father and son. So William and his son Willie both worked for the Sydney Harbour Trust. William was an engine driver and Willie was an apprentice engineer. William enlisted first. Willie, his son, enlisted 3 weeks later, probably as soon as he turned 18, so he went off and enlisted. So Willie was killed at the Battle of Pozieres on the 24th of July, and then his father died 2 weeks later at the Battle of Fromelles. With her husband and son leaving, she's left with no breadwinners in the family, so she's got no way to support all the children. The Sydney Harbour Trust took their case to heart, and in one of the houses that the Sydney Harbour Trust volunteers built, the Crockett's got one of the first houses that they completed. She named the house Pozieres after where her son died in battle. It's just one story, and there would have been thousands of families across Australia going through very similar experiences.
Edith Blake is remembered because she was the first and only Australian nurse to have died during conflict in World War I. She was on board the Glenark Castle, which was torpedoed by a German U-boat and sank with the loss of all lives on board. Edith Blake was a junior nurse at the Coast Hospital in Little Bay when she joined the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service on the 4th of April 1915. In 1917, Edith Blake was serving in the Prisoner of War Hospital in Surrey, in England, caring for the German captured soldiers. In her personal diary, she recorded her conflicted feelings about having to care for enemy soldiers. She was in her 20s, she wasn't married. She effectively left behind her family, her mother and family who she was still living with at the time.
You know, I'd driven down General Holmes Drive. I never really thought about who General Holmes was. He had started work at the Royal Mint when he was just a boy. It was pretty exciting to find this letter that was written in 1874 asking for permission for him and his older brother to work at the Royal Mint. He came from a military family. He started as a bugler with the volunteer infantry at the age of 10. While he was rising through the ranks of the public service, he was also rising through the ranks of the military at the same time. He worked at the Mint for about 4 years, then he joined the Roads Department as a clerk. Within 10 years, he'd been appointed as Chief Clerk of the Water and Sewerage Board. Then within 7 years, he was the Secretary of the Board. While he was working for the public service, there were some really big infrastructure projects like Cataract Dam and Potts Hill Reservoir that were, part of our water supply today.
He left a well-paid and easy job to go overseas and fight. He was a family man. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter, and he was quite a character. He rode to and from work on a horse, and a very precise, measured man who spoke with great authority. He was meticulous, neat, well turned out, soldierly. He had a habit of going to the front line in the Great War and turning up wearing his red general's cap. And the men didn't like that because the Germans would then see what was going on, try and shoot him. And he would leave whilst the Germans then bombarded the place where they'd seen the general's cap peering up over the top of the front line. And he arrived in Gallipoli towards the end of the campaign. He planned, in that capacity, he planned the withdrawal of the men through those dangerous last few days, where gradually men were taken off each night. He's left his son there in the most exposed place you could possibly be. He was finally killed in France on the 2nd of July 1917 after the Battle of Messines, one of the great victories of the Australian Army that really set the stage for the defeat of the Germans in 1918. As General commanding the 4th Division, he was given the task of showing Premier Holman the battlefield. So I left the car there and went to walk up to the top of the hill, and in doing that, bang, hit by a shell from a very small cannon. Just lost, bang, gone.
Albert Tuck.
Albert Tuck represents a typical soldier volunteering for service without much hesitation soon after the war began, but he sadly died only 2 days into the conflict, which was a typical story for many soldiers, unfortunately.
If he's going to be killed, he might as well be killed the second day.
William and Willie Crockett.
All the people who stayed at home, all the women, all the workers who still had to carry on and work under arduous circumstances as well, with long hours, with no pay.
Edith Blake.
The story of Edith Blake being the only Australian nurse to die during conflict in World War I is a story that should be told to everybody.
William Holmes.
And even the King and Queen of England sent their condolences via the Governor-General to say how sorry they were that he died.
Albert Tuck, William and Willie Crockett, Edith Blake, William Holmes and the hundreds of other New South Wales government employees killed in the First World War left behind grieving families that were touched by the tragedy of their deaths for generations. For those who survived and returned home, life changed forever. Today we reflect upon that service that these people individually and collectively gave to the people of New South Wales and to Australia. Each day the State Records Authority of New South Wales brings to light stories from our individual and shared histories through a program of research, exhibitions, talks, online resources, publications and special events. Located in Sydney's thriving west, we pride ourselves on being a place of discovery, learning and knowledge. I invite you all to visit us in person or online and to unlock your own unique and interesting family story while you discover the fascinating story of New South Wales and Australia as told through the New South Wales State Archives.